Hi there.
Good morning.
Good morning. We'll wait for the other two to come online. Then we'll go ahead and get started. All right. Hello, Tina.
Hi, nice to meet you.
And we have all everybody's smiling faces.
Hi.
Oh. And Tina, where are you calling in from today?
From Berlin, from Germany.
From Berlin.
Hmm?
Oh, wonderful. I'll actually be there in December. So
That's not the nicest time to be in Berlin.
I know. I've been there twice to present at a conference, and both times there's been massive blizzards that shut down the country. So I'm hoping that third time will be a charm, that I can actually make it there with my suitcase and yeah, be able to leave on time. So, but it's a wonderful city anyways. Well, wonderful. We have Lynn's just joining us. So the purpose of these sessions is just to give you just kind of an overview of the program and let you ask any questions you'd like, and just sort of see what's on your mind in terms of what brought you here. Just so we can have a chance to get acquainted a bit, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself briefly, like a sentence that you pick out of the many you could use to describe yourself, what seems present to you right now, and where are you calling from?
Okay, I'm January Scott, and I'm calling from Kansas. And in the last 9 months, I've had 4 great-grandchildren.
Wow. Wow, wonderful.
I can go. I'm Karen Suter. I apologize for not having my camera on this morning. I'm a little bit under the weather. I have just yesterday finished up the narrative coaching program, David, which was very nice and lovely. And I'm interested in more of this of the narrative coaching approach. So I'm very interested in this. I'm not entirely sure what it entails, which is why I'm here today. I'm based in Seattle, Washington. I practiced as an academic physician for 30 years. I switched over and got a coaching qualification about 6 years ago. I find the narrative coaching process extremely powerful and more.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Perhaps I can follow Karen, because I also just graduated yesterday from the 9-month course, and really love the experience, David. So when I was thinking what next, and if I wanted to go down the path of any other accreditation, I realized that actually I just loved this program so much. I would rather see what else there is to offer in this way.
All right. Wonderful.
And I'm based in Prague, and I'm a communications consultant freelance otherwise.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Yes, happy to be here. My name is Lynn Gitahi, based in Nairobi, Kenya, born and bred. That's in East Africa. And yeah, I don't think I can describe myself in a sentence. So maybe you just want to put the timer on so that when I overdo it, you're like, okay, Lynn, okay.
I think it'll fit right in, Lynn, if that's the case. So
thank you. Marketing professional, or sort of used to be transitioning into becoming a full-time coach, and currently actually in training. But I'd love to supplement my learning with all there is to offer all over the world. I started my journey with International Coaching Week in May this year. That was, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, your video froze, but we can hear you fine. There we go.
All right, let me finish it and I'll switch my network. Sorry. Yeah, you all froze too. So, yeah, so I attended an ICF, I think it was Lebanon, where someone spoke about narrative coaching, and I just felt like she just scratched the surface. So I thought, okay, I want to really understand what that's about, and that's why I'm actually here.
Okay.
So happy to be here and looking forward to what this has to offer.
Okay. And Tina from Berlin.
Yes. From Berlin, exactly. So I already spoiled that information.
Yeah.
So I'm an executive coach, which means I work one-on-one with leaders, executives, mostly in larger corporations, but then also with leadership teams. And I've graduated as in I've done the Compassionate Inquiry year program with Dr. Gabor Mate last year, I think. Time slipping. And I found this different way of approaching coaching and consultancy and so fulfilling, so enriching in a way. And I work a lot with blind spots and unconscious dynamic already. And so I wanted to learn more, I wanted to move on. And someone, again, also for me, recommended you and your program, and as something that is a bit out of the ordinary and not the usual framework bullshit. And so I ended up here.
To make that my new marketing slogan. Right? Yeah. Wonderful. All right. Well, let me just say a bit about myself, and then we'll get to some slides to help with the of this. So I've been working. I sort of fell into the coaching space about 25 years ago. At the time, I was transitioning to a new career. I was mostly doing large-scale change projects for companies. And just found coaching to be profoundly helpful and a nice combination of a lot of things. And then in the course of these bigger projects, I started to map one day which ones actually worked and worked well, and which ones did not, and what were some of the common variables that led the ones to be so successful. And in large part, it was when I had freedom to be David, and I didn't have to stay in a box. And so what happened was I would end up with projects that were 1, 2, in one case 3 years long. I would have multiple projects over the years with the same person when they would move organizations, because there are people that really recognize a lot of the ways we approached learning, development, and change just weren't as effective as we think they are. I can just put up a little. So I've been teaching narrative coaching for 20 years. I've been doing integrative development for almost that long, but I've only been teaching it for about 5. It's my interest to kind of help us, unlock kind of more natural ways of learning that make way more sense for me. So I'm just going to share a couple of slides. It's easier for me just to put up some words that I've already thought about. And so here we are. And, for those of you who are finishing the narrative coaching program, this is a logical next step in the sense that it takes everything that you did there and amplifies the learning and development portions and frees you from the coaching construct. So you can use this at any moment in time. And one of the huge distinctions we make in this program is that we're through all of our years of schooling and organizational life, there's a lot of focus on the curriculum, and somebody else gets to decide the curriculum, and everybody goes through the same curriculum. And I found that when I was doing these large leadership programs for major companies, I was spending more time by far developing the curriculum as I was teaching. I thought there's something really fundamentally wrong with that. And so I realized I'd rather spend my time actually with people, not negotiating the politics of HR departments and the wrangling over, which page should come first, and because in the end it didn't really matter that much. So I began to think about how else could we do this. And one of the first things that I realized was that oftentimes organizations would separate organizational development and change from training or coaching. And that made no sense, because my first degree was in sociology, and I look at things in terms of systems, and I thought, well, a lot of what's driving underperformance at work is not the people, it's the system. And so I began to think about, what if I brought sort of adult learning and adult development together with organizational learning and organizational development to create one process. So this began as a sort of an amalgamation, an integration of OD and training and coaching into one practice. And then this all, I had been doing a number of works for the state I live in, helping them reinvent their entire employment system, their entire sort of social services system. And I began to think, oh, I can see how this is starting to come together. And then my first real full ID project, although I didn't call it that then, was, we have one more person coming, was a woman that ran a large organization that supported disabled children. And she wanted me to come teach narrative coaching to all, I think like 300 employees. And I turned down her money. I said, I'm not going to do that. I said, because I know how hard it was for you to get that grant and raise that money. And I don't feel like that's going to give you what you want. So she said, well, what are we going to do instead? And I said, I don't know. I'll get back to you tomorrow. And so I went home that night and created integrative development. Which was basically, like I said, a summary or a synthesis of all the things I felt had worked well. And so hers was the first organization that we used this in from the very beginning. And so I worked with them for 2 years. I worked with their neighboring program as well for 2 years. And the results they were getting by approaching all this very differently was so significant that they got the state legislature to change policy around services to disabled children because they were so successful in what they were doing. And so then I began sort of slowly doing this more and more intentionally upfront. And for me, why this work is just so timely is that, you could put, a group of 30 people in the exact same workshop, but they have different levels of readiness, different levels of motivation, different needs, different problems, different uses, different capacities. So why do we assume that any one agenda or one curriculum is going to work for all of them? Matter of fact, it often doesn't work for most of them. And so I began to think about, could we imagine something that would look more like a Montessori classroom for children? So we began to, so in the 2-year-long projects, we didn't do any training beyond one initial introduction for at least 6 months. And we only did training when somebody decided, or a group decided that they needed something. And most of the time we found somebody in the organization who was already really good at that. And I coached them to train their peers. So by the time we all were said and done, I left because they now had all the capacity to do everything I had done for them themselves. So for me, what really drives this is we've all sort of been part of educational systems since we were children that basically in many ways disempowered us from learning how to learn ourselves and helping each other learn. And I feel like if we're going to kind of move through this really difficult period in human history, we've got to find a way to help each other learn faster, connect to each other more, and do things that are real, not things that are imposed on us by somebody else. And this is one of my all-time favorite quotes, and it's sort of why I do this. So when people walk into a coaching session, or when people walk into a training program or a leadership program, there's always something that's going on for them, some of which they sometimes share in programs, oftentimes they do not. And so there's sort of a profound kindness that comes in from this work to begin to invite people into the possibility of embarking on their own learning journey, and then comparing themselves, not as a rating, but connecting with others and comparing notes about how they can help each other on the journey that they need to be on. And so for me, I'll share more about the details of the program in a few minutes, but really it's just a way for you to be able to be with someone in whatever context you find yourself in, and helping figure out what's the potential for growth for them right now. What is the opening? And rather than imposing a curriculum, we invite them to look at their life as a curriculum. What are you being asked to learn? What's available to you right now? What resources would be most useful to you? And what we find is that it's a bit challenging in the beginning because most people are not used to having freedom to learn. They're used to being told what they're supposed to learn. And as they start to take confidence or build confidence in working this way, at some point in time, they actually forget that you're there, which is, for me, the sign of the ultimate victory. So I'm just going to stop there for a minute, and I'm going to, we'll talk a bit in a minute about the program itself, but I'm just really curious at what called you to come? I'd be curious to know more about what brought you here today and what you'd like from this time together. And welcome to, is it Elham? Am I saying that correctly?
Yes, you are.
Oh, excellent, wonderful. And where are you calling in from today?
I'm calling in from France.
From France, okay, wonderful. So I'm curious, what intrigued you to come?
What intrigued me to come was just my experience that coaching by itself is limits, in a sense, the impact and the way I can work with organizations. And I just was intrigued to learn more about the program, the approach, and how it might fit with having more of an impact that just goes beyond the coaching.
All right. How about for others?
I was laughing at myself at the beginning because I thought I was coming for narrative coaching, and I'm hearing more about the ID way. So I was like, oh, did I confuse them?
You
but
did,
I'm here.
but that's okay. You're welcome. Yeah, and if you want, there's
actually,
a coaching program next, and I think in about 10 days we'll do another one of these for narrative coaching as well. Yeah.
And I received a recording, so I think I can also look at it. But that said, I think this is a perfectly serendipitous, almost divine arrangement because listening to you, I'm like, I was actually asking myself about organizational development and looking deeper into that and see how I could marry it with coaching. And then I'm just hearing you say that you already have this program that puts them together and adds learning as well. And so I am here because, the divine nature knew I needed to be.
Okay, wonderful. Maybe I can add to that. So what you said about what is it that life calls for, or basically what are people ready for? This is basically what I arrived in for myself with the people that I work with the organizations I work with. I always felt like I need to figure out what they're capable of as the next step, because sometimes it's so obvious where they need to go. It's so obvious what the problem is. But then I also, and we overwhelm them with too many steps or like a step too far out. And so I was thinking, how can I learn better to actually understand what's the next possible step? And so then when I actually read your website about this, I was like, yeah, exactly. This is what I'm looking for. Like how to know what the next step is and only the next step. So I think this is the piece that hooked me and that brought me in. What I'm looking for is really to understand how this translate into the work with organizations in particular, because what they come with is, well, here's a change process, or here's a problem that we are facing. Do this or that workshop, do this or that training. I mean, I'm not so much into training, so I'm not doing training, but still they come with a very, very different mindset. And I wonder how this beautiful way of thinking, of an integrative way of coaching and so on, is actually translated into something an organization can also understand. so
Hmm.
that they can connect to this, and so it
Yeah.
becomes applicable in the work that I do, basically.
Yeah. Even though I built all this and I've been doing it for a long time, I never sell this as integrative development because they have no idea what I'm talking about. And then I try to explain it to them, they get confused. So then I usually, when I would win work, it was because I would just demonstrate this work in the interview. And I would give them a lived experience of it. I go, yeah, we would like that, please. But not always. There's a lot of organizations that just are still quite attached to old ways of thinking. And so the world's a big place. There's plenty of work to do. So I don't bother chasing them anymore. But I observe that if you talk, I mean, so like we get enamored with all this stuff. Our clients don't care. They get up in the morning to go to work and do their job and try to have a sane life and and try to feel like they're getting some meaning and purpose out of their work. And they will have forgotten most of what we teach them within a couple of days of coming to a workshop. And most of the time, again, because the culture of most organizations is not surfacing opportunities for them to practice or try new things, and they're back into the grind with all the pressures that led to the behaviors that mandated the workshop. So it just becomes this, I find, a never-ending circle. And so the ones that where this has been really successful, Tina, have been ones when I have a very forward-thinking sponsor. I just spent 3 years with PwC in Australia, and I had an amazing, there's two women, one was the chief learning officer and one was, she was basically queen. She didn't really have a very high job title, but she was the queen of everything. She was just extraordinary. And they would just kind of position me around all the players in the firm so I could survive in the beginning. And then basically what we did, we had one common tool set, and across the 3 years, I did 9 different projects for them to reinvent whole parts of their organization by getting a group of people that were sort of charged with making something better. And then we'd use me and our tools and processes and them, and I just walk alongside them while they're reinventing their own process. It started, that project started when I was asked originally to come and teach coaching skills in the organization, which we did, and that was one of our projects. But the person I was working with was amazing on this particular piece, the coaching piece. They had like millions of dollars of binders on their shelf of things they had done. And I said, well, what if that's actually working? And no, not very much. A lot of the language is being used, but it wasn't really changing the behavior. And so I really admire them. They really went after this for 3 years to begin to imagine how can we embed this work in the way we actually do work. So we don't have work over here and training over there. And then because the two hardly ever come together. And so we just, everything that we do in ID is around things people actually do. We don't train, we don't do role plays. Sometimes we'll do case studies if it's really helpful, but often it's not. And we get them to work on their own environment. All right. Anything else anybody wants to share before we move on? I'm going to share some more about the program itself. Mary Brennan.
I just add to that a little bit because I'm happy to hear everything that was just discussed. I was working more than 15 years in a large financial services organization, similar to PwC. I was a communications officer, and during that time, I worked with all of the executives. And we developed a lot of different programs that I watched come in and come out. And what was interesting for me was at every level. So, at the level of the executives, you could bring in all sorts of inspirational, many different things. And everybody would love it, but then get back to work and say, yeah, that was wonderful. But, we still get stuck here. We get blocked here. The CEO says this, so we can't actually implement that. So we went down and we said, okay, let's get him at the director level. they're going to be partners soon. So we gave them every tool they needed, super inspirational retreats. We brought in, Fred Kaufman, Potential Project, all the different ways. And we went through 3 cohorts before finally they became partners, and they said, this was amazing. I would recommend it to anybody, but it doesn't work up here.
Yeah.
So we went down again, and tried again at another level. So all I wanted to say is that experience is what brought me to the narrative coaching program in the first place. And I am developing a new program outside of that organization now with some ex-employees as well. And I wanted to see what this experience is all about, so we can find a better way that is more manageable, no matter what is thrown at you.
Yeah.
When you leave the room.
Yeah, I think my greatest success was the number of particularly younger HR people and L&D people that came through our 3 years, who are now doing this in other places, who have fundamentally changed what they're bringing to the new organizations. So I'd have to live to be 150 to actually see this really flourish, because it's going to take a long time. But I just feel like I just could no longer collude. I stopped teaching in MBA programs. I stopped running, massive leadership programs for big companies, because it just felt like enormous amounts of work, and I just wasn't really seeing any benefit in the long run at all. So sort of like with narrative coaching, we make it personal. And so like in the firm, a lot of these people, particularly the men, work massive hours. And so for a lot of them, their project was actually rebuilding relationship with their own children. And that was the biggest win for most of them. So let me just go back and I'll share a few more things here. So we'll just talk. There's just a couple of slides on each of these, but just want to make sure to talk more about what makes this unique and what's it like to work this way, and then what's it like to be in the program. So I'll just let you read this for a minute, and then I'll share a few things about what I think this is about. So a couple of things about this. So when you're freed to move around, I found that I could move between roles pretty quickly. It wasn't locked into being a trainer or a coach. I found that I could, people would come into things we were doing, or invite themselves, ask for things that they could be doing that were very much in line with what was most important to them. And because I wasn't tied to a particular role, I could quite often just respond to that in a very organic way. So I'll give you a really practical example from another organization. It was a very competitive, very masculine leadership team. They would, and during the day, talk endlessly about teamwork, and at night throw each other under the bus constantly. And in one of the areas of the organization, there was a gentleman who had extraordinary expertise, and so it eventually made his way to the top of that part of the organization. And then, because of changes in the market, had nothing to do with him, his expertise wasn't as useful anymore. And he had been basically carrying their division for years because of this profound skill he had in expertise, etc. And so these guys have been, the other guys had been basically, riding in his tail for all this time. And then when his work kind of fell off, they just abandoned him basically and said, "You're on your own." And so like no gratitude, no like, "Oh, thanks for helping us, we'll return the favor now," or, and I thought, so I have no sway over any of the politics. I had no power in the organization to do anything about his situation. So I spent 2 or 3 sessions with him, drawing on my background as a grief counselor, at helping him deal with his betrayal, feeling of betrayal, and his recognition of a reality of an organization that he had never allowed himself to see before. And so there was no real job description for this, what I was doing. There was no actually even contract. It was part of a retainer I had with them. But so he was a wonderful human being. And so we basically got him to a place where he quit, but he quit on his own terms and in his own way, having resolved the beginning layers of his bitterness around what they had done. And so for me, I feel like, okay, so now this gentleman's now out in the world. I lost track of him after a couple of years, but he's now out in the world, a more whole person than he would have been if he had just left or tried to take them down or tried to get revenge or tried to whatever. And so there is no, the return on the firm, that group's investment, is there for them because, but more importantly, the world's now a better place because he's in a better place himself. And we found actually some ways to begin to address some of the politics with some of the rest of his team. But in the end, to do nothing would have left him suffering, would have left the team unaccountable for all of this. And so for me, it's like you never know in these situations kind of what is the potential for learning and development. For him, it was high. For them, it was low. But in both cases, we were able to make some progress. The 5 maturities is a piece of research I've been doing through the Institute of Coaching at Harvard. So I'm writing a report for them. And it basically is helping us move beyond competency models in assessing and developing practitioners. And it actually grew out of this program. It'll be sort of one of the architectures for how we build this, recognizing that a lot of, there are some unique skills that are part of this program, but more importantly, there's a maturity that comes about trusting yourself without having to rely on lots of props. And so that's the ultimate outcome. So, and for me, therefore, it's more like jazz. We're not going to play. We're not doing recitals of playing Mozart. We're going to play jazz because we're going to learn how to improvise in a pretty profound way. And so, again, one of the things that's really unique about this work is that we don't decide for other people what they're supposed to learn. Now, there can be mandates in an organization, or a team could have a shared goal or something, but ultimately, we're going to focus sort of almost in a Buddhist way, everywhere and nowhere at the same time. And so there's very much an attention in this work to what's actually right in front of us, as opposed to what's in our head about what we think we're supposed to be doing. And so we help our clients to do this as well, so they start to notice their own environment more fully. There's one of the things we did this year in the program, which worked extraordinarily well, I believe, was we brought in some of the narrative release work that I've developed around the kind of psycho-spiritual part of this work to kind of, how do I do that? How do I have the courage to kind of work like this? And so one of the things that we use some is around our breath, but also, as I'll show you in a few minutes, this idea of what we call structured emergence. So we bring structure when it's necessary to scaffold what's trying to happen, as opposed to putting all the scaffolding in place first, say, now come here and learn this. And so there's kind of the in and out of this in terms of it, like if for this gentleman, I was describing. So there was absolutely no way that he would allow any flow at the beginning of our conversations, because he was just devastated. by what his peers who had been working with for years had done to him. And so I had to keep creating more and more safety and structure for him to even allow, and it was not a very emotionally intelligent organization anyways, but to allow him to actually even feel what he felt. And then as he started to trust me, trust himself, trust the safety of our conversation, then he could start to breathe out and start to speak more of what was true for him. And I'll show you an example at the very end of this. And so a lot of what we do is we help people pay attention to what's actually happening around them. And so I've used this piece of the puzzle to help organizations completely rebuild leadership programs from the bottom up. And we'll share a bunch of those case studies in the program. So rather than I'm coming in as an expert or an interventionist to make something happen for you, I'm standing with you in the field and noticing with you, where do we need to put our attention? And I'm only interested in where we need to put attention that you as a client are willing to go yourself. I'm not going to hold the door open for you forever. I'm not going to do the heavy lifting for you. Whatever you decide is important to you, that's where we're going to go first. And then this is something that's really emerged for me over the last couple of years in doing more and more of this work, is that, and this shows up often like in workshops. And so when you design workshops with little to no curriculum, or you're with even a coaching client or whatever client, and they're talking with you, I've sort of evolved this sort of style of just noticing out loud, rather than analyzing or trying to coach them with questions. Just like I'm noticing that your whole face just turned white as you were describing that piece of the story. I'm noticing that you keep looking over to this half of the team, but not that half of the team. And just speak plainly to what we're seeing, and helping people to name and notice kind of what's happening, which is the antithesis of how a lot of people go through their workday. And so then when we get them to start noticing more and naming things more, then opportunities for them to learn and grow start to become much more obvious to them. Yeah, and so I'm just going to stop there and see if you have any questions, and then we'll kind of come back. I'm going to give you a little practice here in a minute so you can taste some of this for yourself. We'll come back and talk a bit about the program itself and kind of what that looks like in real life. Okay? So here's what I'd like you to do. I would like you I'm going to put you into pairs. Let's see what's happening in the chat here in case somebody needs something. I'm going to put you in pairs, and what I'm going to ask you to do is just for one of you to share for a couple of minutes something that's going on in your life or your work that you're kind of thinking about right now, or is on your mind. And for you, if you're the recipient of this or the listener to this, I want you just to suspend any need to do anything, any need to be helpful, any need to change anything, and just be with them. And if you feel inclined to say something, great. If you don't, that's fine. But just imagine, what if I didn't have to try to get somewhere with this person? What if they didn't have to get anywhere right now? They could actually just be with what they just said. And it's it's really just to give you the experience of noticing the noise that shows up in your head, like it does for most of us, about, I should be doing this, or I'm curious about that, I should ask about this, and just kind of be with what you're noticing. And if you feel like naming some of that, great. If not, just remain present. And I want you just to give you, we'll make this brief, but just to give you an experience of what it's like to actually let what's needing to happen come towards you, as opposed to you pushing it out on the other person. That's the main thing about it. Just notice where the energy goes, And if you feel it like all coming to you, like, oh, I should do something now, just breathe out and give it back. And just to see if you can get a little glimmer of what it's like to just be in the field with somebody else who's sharing something. So any questions about the practice and or what we've talked about so far? Like I said, when we come back, we'll look at the program itself. But anything for right now? All good? All right, let me just get your into some groups here. There we go. Perfect. So let's give you a brief amount of time. Let's give you 8 minutes. That'll be plenty. Just to give you a little taste of this. All right, enjoy.
Don't convincing about the validity of and the usefulness and why organizations need it now. But as you mentioned earlier, you've stopped wasting your time with the organizations that are in the traditional kind of way. And so just in terms of practical thinking forward, in terms of how open globally organizations are going to be to a more innovative approach, I guess the question is more around, do you find that you can go into more traditional organizations and after they kind of sense it, even though you don't label it that way, they're on board to try it? Or are you just saying, you know what, there's maybe only 15, 20% of organizations that are really ready to partner with me on this kind of thing, and I need to just kind of look at that?
Yeah, so mostly I do the latter. So because 20% of the entire world's organizations is a lot of prospects. So
I just threw out that number, but maybe you'll maybe it's 5. I don't know. It's
well, but my, this is going to be for younger generations, but you look at what the pandemic's done, and the only reason we're pressuring people to go back to work is to prop up real estate. But the younger generations, I think, will demand this. They want customization. They want personalization. They want. Many of them are much more comfortable with diversity. They want to have a more blended life. They're not going to kill themselves for some false promise for later. And so I think that so I'm basically planting trees that other people will harvest, in a way, or planting crops other people will harvest. I think a lot of the old style organizations will cling to the way we have now to the very end. But I just think to address the issues that we face, we have to be able to free people up to remember how to learn and how to grow and how to be with each other. And it's got to be about around real things. Can't be around pretend things anymore. I don't think we have time. I don't believe we'll actually survive if we keep that up. And so I don't need to change everybody. That's the people I touch. I try to do a better job using this work. And that's enough. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. I just wanted to share, I'll just share my screen one more time. So I'm going to share one more slide with you. If you're interested in coming to join us, and I can put this in the chat box, but if you just go onto the website under the IDWay program, which is up in the menu bar, you can actually sign up for our interest list, which means when you sign up, you'll save $200. So that's there for you. If you, there we go. I can do it now in the chat box. And so and then if you have any questions, why does it always do this? You can actually just reach out to us, and happy to set up some time to talk further if you've got more questions. Yeah. All right. Is there anything else for today that's important to you before we call it a day? All good? All right. Well, I hope you choose to come join us. It's been a wonderful to spend this time with you, and I wish you well for the rest of the day, wherever you are. Take care.
Thanks a lot. Enjoy your day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.